What is up, everybody? Happy Wednesday. We are now 2 days out from the Packers' ugly loss to the New York Giants on Monday night. And, just looking around the internet at all my comments, what all you guys are saying, there's no doubt. I think if I could say there's one person where the most anger is being pointed at right now, there's no doubt it's Joe Barry. And that's honestly been the case for a long time here in his 3 seasons in Green Bay. There had been a stretch there where it was pretty quiet just because the Packers defense had played well, held the Lions in check, hold the Chiefs in check. But now it's back because it was just a bad performance by the defense, and there were some questionable calls, some questionable schematic things that Joe Barry, decided to do in this game that allowed Tommy DeVito to come in and beat us. And he apparently is the NFC Player of the Week. So it's just not a great week for the Packers. But I want to share with you here a little bit of an excerpt from what Dan Orlovsky had to say about the Packers defense. I was listening to NFL Live. I think it's from yesterday. And so let me just show you this, and then I'll give my thoughts. If you are new here, I put up Packers content every day, multiple times a day. I have like 2 or 3 videos from earlier today, so feel free to check those out. So here is what Dan Orlovsky had to say.
How did the Packers defense allow this to happen, Dan?
Lack of second half adjustments for me was a big deal. I mean, they couldn't cover Wan'Dale Robinson at all. He made a bunch of big plays. First half, you saw a ton of quarterback runs. Some of it was designed, and some of it was Tommy DeVito using his legs. Okay, so I give him a little grace in the first half. You don't have a ton of tape on the young man. Maybe you were caught off guard and surprised by it. It kept going in the second half. There was never an adjustment to the designed run. There was never a spy that was delegated towards him. They didn't have a plan for Brian Daboll's zone read plan. And I just was shocked by how little adjustment happened from Green Bay's defense when it came to, it was very clear Tommy DeVito was going to use his legs in any situation, and they never did anything to try to counter it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point. I was shocked to see how many times DeVito was able to scramble out of the pocket, especially those ones where it felt like the Packers' pass rush was pressing in, forcing him to move up in the pocket. But then there was just a wide open lane every single time. He had 10 carries, 71 yards. And when it happens to you once, twice, as Dan Orlovsky was saying, this isn't something that Danny DeVito had put on tape. I'm pretty sure up to this point, he only had like 80 rushing yards on 20 or so carries. And then in this game, he has 71 yards on 10 carries. So this wasn't something that he had really shown the ability to do in the past. From watching previous games, some highlights before the Packers game, it did look to me like he was pretty elusive. He has some mobility, but he never really showed exactly what he did against the Packers on Monday night. But once it happens, let's say 1 time, 2 times, even 3 times, how do you not, make some kind of adjustment to allow, there not to be huge open lanes in the running game? And we have seen the Packers struggle against lots of mobile quarterbacks in the past for a while. I do think not having Quay Walker out there probably hurt us because he has so much speed and the ability to chase guys down, and they're in the middle of the field. And I'm pretty sure in games past, facing off against running quarterbacks, the Packers have used Quay as a spy. And I'm not sure if the Packers put anyone as a spy near the end of the game there. If they did, it didn't work. But how do you... I think when you go into a game and you need to stop Saquon Barkley, they did a pretty good job for a majority of the day. But once DeVito starts going on the ground like he was, you got to find a way to make those adjustments. And this isn't even touching on the defense and the soft coverage that was being played on the final drive. And so it was just all around unfortunate game for the defense. Let me play a little bit more here and listen here.
13 is the number of times they ran zone read. And according to Stats and Info, they averaged more yards per play than any offense in the NFL when doing so with Tommy DeVito.
So I think that was Mina Kimes on the show. So you just heard that stat. 13 zone reads, and it was the most yards on zone reads this season to Tommy DeVito. You have guys out there like Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and DeVito somehow, cooks the Packers defense. And, just thinking about the rest of the season, we, of course, are still in the playoff hunt. And things need to go well. I think we have like a 47% chance to make the playoffs. However they calculate those odds, it would have been much higher, like 76% or so, if the Packers had beat the Giants, which they could have if they would have played as they had previous weeks. But now my question is, how are we going to face off against lower tier talent? Because the Packers have shown they can play really well when they're on their game. And when we play down to the other talent and we don't, I guess have the right scheme, the right adjustments at the proper times in the games, you just sort of can't expect to win these games and these close ones when, you allow things like this to happen. And so we'll see what the Packers adjust going forward. We'll see if there's any kind of changes made on defense. Hopefully we don't see something like this happen again, but it has happened many different times under Joe Barry, and it's not just Joe Barry. There's no doubt the Packers players were missing tackles, sort of reading things the wrong way when it came to the zone reads, crashing in, not sort of keeping contain on certain runs. There were lots of issues there, and it was, I think, the fourth game the Packers have allowed over 200 yards rushing. And as I said, I think in one of yesterday's videos, even though this is a 11th best scoring defense in the NFL, the fact that we've allowed 4 teams to run for 200 plus yards, I just don't know if that's a formula for success. It works sometimes, but I think if you're going to be a top tier defense that is able to carry your team in the playoffs and give you a chance to play 3-4 games to make it to a Super Bowl and play well enough against all the opposing talent you're going to be facing, you can't have a porous run defense like the Packers do. I just don't think that's a formula for consistent success. And while it may work time to time, it's not going to be I think that's the reason, the weakness that is going to hold this Packers team back if they really ever want to truly find success and go on a deep playoff run. Because even back in the early 2010s, throughout the 2010 to 2020, there were countless games we could go back later and find them where the Packers just got dominated on the ground. I remember the Raheem Mostert game a few years back, whenever that was a while ago, like 200 yards rushing. And those games stick with you. And I feel like the entire offseason after a loss like that, you're trying to contemplate, okay, what can we do to fix these holes and to make sure this never happens again? And yet it continues to happen. And I've seen some other people on the internet talking about, or Twitter and comments and things like that, talking about how it just sort of feels like this continues to happen no matter who is the defensive coordinator on the Packers, where this run defense just hasn't been good for years and years. And I think it was former Packer Mike Daniels was talking about how there was sort of just like basically a lack of physicality and how he wanted to play that way in Green Bay and sort of, be aggressive and mentality kind of thing. And he seemed to not think that was sort of the way, I guess, the Packers in general wanted things to go. Let me read that tweet specifically because I found it very interesting from a former Packers player sort of talking about the way that the defense has been in Green Bay for years and years. And so here is what he had to say. Mike Daniels said this: Packers fans, no matter the coordinator, no matter the personnel, we seem to not be able to be elite on defense. I played alongside legit Hall of Fame players, several All-Pros and Pro Bowlers, yet mid to bottom ranks. Years later, I see the same thing even with a culture change. Why? So that is a question, a very good question. He responded to someone else, and let me find the answer because he sort of went into more depth. So someone named Packer Frog said this to him: some of it is the incompetence as it pertains to scheme. It's also the mentality of the players and coaches. I've said it for years. There's no killer instinct in Green Bay. You and Quay Walker are the only players since Wayne Simmons, mid-1990s, that had a nasty mindset that matters. And then Mike Daniels responded to that, saying, the guys hated that, though. Honestly, my attitude was well received in Detroit and Cincinnati. They even had me give all the pregame speeches on our Super Bowl run. In Green Bay, everyone wasn't a fan of it. There was even an article with anonymous sources on how I yelled too much. So it sounds like Mike Daniels was basically saying that there wasn't that kind of nasty or mentality, if you want to call it that, in Green Bay when it came to, I guess, the entire team, the defensive side of the ball. And I do wonder why that would be, because it's different defensive coordinator than it was back then. And I do think that for many years there has been a softness with the Packers defense. But I do think there's been moments this year where we've seen that physicality, that intensity from guys like Rashawn Gary, from guys like Jonathan Owens at times, who a few games ago was bringing in some really nice hits, playing physical, playing tough and aggressive. And I feel like there are some players in the Packers defense who operate in that way. And I don't think that, they're out here and they're like soft people or soft players. I don't think that's the case. But it is interesting to see, Mike Daniels discuss that. And I feel like when you watch a defense like the 49ers, the way they fly around, play physically, you wonder, what would need to shift or happen to allow the Packers defense to play with a similar physicality. Maybe it's just talent. When a guy is very good and is faster and stronger, things go better. But the Packers have tons of top tier talent when it comes to physicality, athleticism, what is it, 7 or 8 first-round draft picks. And we have missed tons of guys because of injuries. Jair, Savage has been out for a while. He didn't play great last game. Quay Walker missed that game. I think he's a very physical player, has played much better his second year. But I think there are just lots of questions among all of us as to why the Packers defense can't ever seem to break through and really be that elite defense, because we are in the sort of the cusp right now, at least when you look at scoring. But all those other metrics I showed you the other day, DVOA, EPA per play, the Packers are still pretty low on those kind of ranks. And I think the one thing that has helped us is our red zone defense being pretty good. So even though the Packers have allowed tons of yards and have been ranked pretty low in that area, the red zone defense has allowed this defense to rank higher when it comes to scoring defense. But when you have performances like we did against the Giants and Tommy DeVito, third stringer, who honestly has some talent, he can play. You can't say he's not, doesn't at least have a little bit of talent there, because we saw that against the Packers defense. But just when you think about the future here, I do wonder if a big change needs to be made for this defense, because it feels like it's been the same thing, and you may have a little bit of periods of time where things seem like they're going well, which it had been for maybe a month, and then out of nowhere you have a game like this where you're just like, really? Are we serious right now? So who knows? That is all I have for this video. Thank you for watching. If you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below.